Hello. I just picked something at random off the shelf that I'm fairly certain I've never talked about before. And what have we got? We got Bee Gees' Greatest Hits. Now this is secondhand. I picked this up, I'm pretty sure for $1. A lot of these are kind of, I can remember specifically buying it, usually if it's something I was really excited about, but other times I still for some reason have like a memory of buying it or what shop it was at. Usually if I can remember the shop, I can remember the price because certain shops have certain prices. I'm pretty sure this was at a $1 shop. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. And you can see it was originally £12. So whoever bought this originally bought it in the UK and then brought it over to New Zealand and then donated it to a charity shop, and then I bought it. So the Bee Gees, the greatest hits, the record, manufactured, and okay, that's just, and then we got this, what do they call this? I actually saw someone use a term to describe the sticker. I can't remember for the life of me what it was. Like the technical term, like I guess the marketing term. If you work for a record company, you would know what these stickers were specifically called, that they put on the front of CDs to kind of advertise what was within it or something. You know, usually they name the singles or something like that. In this case, it says 40 hits, 2 CDs, including How Deep Is Your Love, Staying Alive, Night Fever, Tragedy, More Than a Woman, Jive Talking, Massachusetts, Words, Guilty, You Should Be Dancing, plus new recordings of Emotion, Heartbreaker, Islands in the Stream, and Immortality. Don't know when this came out. I'm going to guess. The Bee Gees had kind of a couple of resurgences. You know, the Bee Gees were always massive, but if we think they had their heyday in the 70s, and then they had kind of a mini resurgence. Remember there was that maybe it was just me, and I'll imagine this, but I remember there was kind of a little disco resurgence in the late 90s, almost kind of like tongue-in-cheek. It was I can't remember the dates or the times or why, but for some reason that kind of sticks in my mind with bands like ABBA. Not that ABBA was a disco band, but I guess 70s music, maybe that's better. 70s pop kind of had a mini resurgence. And then before Morris died, was it Maurice or Morris? I'm not sure how to pronounce. They had a secondary resurgence where they released that album, which included This Is Where I Came In. This is how is that the song? This is the day I came in. Okay, whatever that's called. That was around 2002. He died about 2003. Anyway, my point is that a greatest hits like this, I imagine, came out probably around one of those. Maybe it was before he died. So I'm going to say 2000. Actually, I have no idea. Maybe it was after that. Let's say mid 2000. Let's say 2005. 2001. I'm completely off. So this was before he died, because he definitely died after 2001. You can see there, like I said, 40 tracks, 21 and 19 across 2 discs. Now you can see the condition of this isn't superb because the cover case has been cracked. Kind of like something's, what do you call that? Almost like shattered, but not shattered because it's plastic, so it doesn't really shatter. And then there's a larger crack. I've seen that crack across here. But the hinges are still intact, so that's always a bonus. And then let's see the condition of this double disc holder, because these things are typically very weak, and if either the hinges is broken, whether it's the kind of that swing that way or this swing that way, and then this jewel case hub are particularly weak in the double disc holders. So let's see how it stands up. It seems to be holding it okay. Oh yeah, it's not falling out, because often when you pull it up, the CD will just be sitting against the inlay here. Like the teeth won't even hold it. But that looks actually pretty good. The hinges has held up on both sides. God, it's so flimsy though. Looking at it, you like. There's no wonder why these break so often and so easily. It's the most flimsy piece of plastic you could imagine. Compared to this side, which is kind of good. Like these things break as well, obviously, but at least there's kind of like a substantive piece of plastic there overlapping. And then the discs themselves. Oh, good. I played this through. Oh, there's a bit of a scratch on that one, but can you see that? You can see me. I don't know. Something I just noticed here. No, actually, don't worry about that. I thought I'd see something, but I didn't see something. Let's look at the booklet. The booklet's in tip-top condition, except there's a little bit of, what would you call that? Dog ear? No, dog ear is the corner. What do you call it? Like kind of like it's been grated against the edge of the plastic, so it kind of pushes the paper back over time and kind of it gets damaged permanently. I don't know what the name word for that is. You can see it's here and here, which is where those two, that one and that one, that kind of are designed to keep the booklet from sliding out. But really all they do is over time put kind of dents and creases into the booklet. They're not really necessary. Like I don't think the booklet would really slide out. If these things didn't have that, if it was just that kind of very shallow lip that runs across the edge of here, I think that would be more than enough in 99% of situations. But for whatever reason, they decide to put those on as well. So you get that damage there and there, but not the end of the world, is it? There they are, the brothers Gibb. What are their names? I can't remember the oldest guy. Barry, Robin, and Morris and Robin. That's Robin there. You can, because is it? Robin was particularly, not wanting to speak ill of the dead, and an amazing talent and all that. But he did look quite alien-esque. Even as he got older, and when you kind of see that there, and you think, well, that's got to be Robin. It wasn't only the teeth though. It was kind of like the shadow of his face and just his facial structure. They don't really look like brothers, do I guess Morris and Barry look enough. And then there was the other one as well, Andy, who he died young as well, I think. So that means Barry's the only one left. I actually saw an interview, this would have been a few years ago now, where it was an Australian interview. I think it was 60 Minutes Australia, because they are obviously Australian by way of Scotland, I think. I think they were born in Scotland, then moved to Australia, or maybe they born in Australia, moved to Scotland, and came back to Australia, something like that. You can hear the little bit of Australian accent when they speak, mixed in with the kind of British, whatever. Maybe it wasn't even Scotland. Maybe it was just somewhere in England. Anyway, it was an interview. It was actually quite sad. It was Barry, and they were talking about his brothers, and he kind of broke down in tears during the interview, and he kind of said, "This is kind of the first time that I've really deeply understood that they're all gone," meaning Robin and Morris, and I guess Andy as well. And it was like, I could kind of understand that, where sometimes, and not even, it doesn't have to be sad or tragic things, it could be other things as well, where you go through life and events happen, sometimes really big events, and you just kind of go a bit onto autopilot to deal with those things, and you don't take the time to slow down and really think deeply about this on a I don't know what you call what level, not a subconscious level, maybe on a conscious level, a truly conscious level, because sometimes our consciousness, like I said, runs very much on autopilot, and we can't consciously accept things unless we actually go through a process of acceptance, and that can be hard to do, especially if you're busy and if you just don't have maybe even like the desire to do that, because it can be very difficult dealing with someone's death on that kind of level. Maybe it's just easier just to kind of almost imagining that they're still there. They're not really gone in your mind. They're gone on the intellectual level, but on a more deeper level. And anyway, yeah, in the interview, he was like, the woman was asking him questions, not like super deeply probing questions, but kind of talking about his brothers. And then he was like, he started to cry, and he was like, this is the first time I've really truly understood that they're all gone. And it was really sad thinking, because there's, obviously Andy, I don't know very much about Andy Gibb. I know that he wasn't in the Bee Gees, obviously, but I think he died quite early, like kind of late 20s, early 30s. And then Morris died relatively young. I think he was early 50s, maybe. And then Robin was sick for a long time. I think he dealt with cancer off and on for quite a long time, and then finally died. And I have no idea when that, because it's the last five, since COVID. I've talked about this before. That so the time is kind of constricted and expanded, and it's really hard to kind of get a grip. I think he actually died before that whole thing, though I'm not 100% sure. There was someone recently. Who was it? I was searching, and I was like, "Oh my God, is that person dead?" Who was it? Oh, I can't remember now. Whoever it was the same kind of thing. It was like I kind of in passing had like heard, oh, that person died, but then hadn't fully taken notice. And then you go back and you think, oh, this person died in 2022, and it just kind of passed me by in some way. And then they are a bit older. So again, the one that stands out is always Robin. And that's maybe more recognizable. He was the one kind of losing his hair earlier than the other two. Drew the short straw on that one genetically, didn't he? And there's them at their Saturday Night Fever prime. They look quite ridiculous, but great still in their own way, aren't they? And then I guess there's kind of the 80s, and then into the 90s, late 90s. And then we just got kind of that, and that's taken from the video of This Is Where I Came In. In that video, they are in the back of a caravan being towed by a truck or a car, like an old kind of, imagine like a 1950s or 60s era caravan being towed by whatever car was around back there in the UK or Australia or New Zealand. And they're in the back of this thing, and it's kind of going, moving side to side, and they're playing and singing the song. But yeah, I guess this is going to have the years in which these were released. Yes, it does. So let's have a look. They have got an enormous amount of super famous songs, because, not just the songs that they did, but also the songs that they wrote for other people. Like, obviously, Islands in the Stream is one that I always remember, but there's lots of other ones too. So very early New York mining disaster, 1941. So that came out in 67. So they were kind of contemporaries of the Beatles. And when I say contemporaries, I don't mean at that level, but I mean around releasing music at the same time. It's kind of like, Sgt. Pepper's era Beatles. To Love Somebody, that was 67. See, I would have guessed that was later. When I hear that song, To Love Somebody, it kind of sounds like early 70s to me for some reason. Holiday, Massachusetts, that was 67 as well. So they released a lot in 67. Words is 1967 as well. These are all recorded in March and October 1967. I've Got to Get a Message to You, 68. I Started a Joke, covered by Faith No More, 68. 1st of May, Saved by... So it's kind of funny that when you think of the Bee Gees, most people immediately do jump to disco era Bee Gees, because that was so massive and so kind of iconic. But they really did make a lot of music in the late 60s, kind of a lot of, well-known, famous music that you still hear on the radio, not just, Staying Alive and stuff like that. And we come over here, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, 71. Jive Talking, 75. Sorry, this is focusing in and out, isn't it? It's hard. I think I'm going to turn the light on here. I'm just going to turn the light on over here because that usually helps with the focusing. This new place we're living in is the shape of the geometry of the house makes it so that in the midday it doesn't get a lot of sun because it's kind of like a long shape. Oops. And so therefore, in this place where I am right now in the kitchen, it's quite shaded from the sun, doesn't get a lot of natural light. Fanny, Be Tender With My Love, that song I don't know if I know. Maybe if I heard it I'd know, but by just the name of it I don't know. From the album Main Course. Okay, so Jive Talking's from Main Course. See, I would have guessed Jive Talking was from Saturday Night Fever because it sounds like part of that style of music, doesn't it? Like I said, I'm really not the biggest Bee Gees fan at all. I like some of their music, but I certainly don't know what's what on what album and all the rest of it. 77, You Should Be Dancing. See, that's from Children of the World. Again, I would have guessed You Should Be Dancing was absolutely from Saturday Night Fever. And that was 76. So this is, when punk is starting. To give you an idea, Staying Alive, that's definitely Saturday Night Fever. How Deep is Your Love? One of the most played songs. I don't know what it's like in your country, but in New Zealand, I'd say How Deep Is Your Love would be up there with songs like Yesterday and Hey Jude and American Pie, as in you hear 2 or 3 times per day on the radio still. Night Fever, obviously. More Than a Woman. I always liked that song. More Than a Woman. Then we moved past that into the late 70s. Too Much Heaven. Tragedy. See again, so Tragedy is from the album Spirits Having Flown. I would have assumed that was a Saturday Night Fever song. Any song that's kind of a vaguely disco feel to it, dancing type feel, then I would just assume that, that's a Saturday Night Fever soundtrack song, isn't it? Love You Inside Out. Guilty is Barbra Streisand with Barry Gibb. Heartbreaker. Is that the Heartbreaker that Dionne Warwick song? Or did, what's the name? What's his face? Who's the guy who usually writes music for her? He died a couple of years ago. Oh. Burt Bacharach. Didn't he, maybe he wrote that? Is that a different Heartbreaker? I think I've heard before that the Bee Gees did, or sorry, at least maybe Barry Gibb wrote Heartbreaker. I think I've actually heard him sing it, or heard them sing it. Or maybe, I don't know. Anyway, let's just assume it is the same Heartbreaker that Dionne Warwick sang. Because it has, I actually don't like the song Heartbreaker by Dionne Warwick, because I love Dionne Warwick. I love her voice, and I love her stuff that she did with Burt Bacharach in the 1960s especially. But when it started getting to like the 70s and 80s, I don't really like that stuff as much, because it sounds quite dated, and maybe dated to an era of music that I wasn't as big a fan of. But I just, speaking of Dionne Warwick, there's this amazing footage of her, a live performance that she did. It would have been the mid-60s, maybe. Live in some bar in Belgium. She's singing Walk On By. And she looks so young. She must be, I don't know how old, but 20 maybe even younger than 20. And it's just an amazing performance. Not like her voice is doing anything, it's just like, it's so perfect. Her delivery and the way it's filmed as well, really beautiful in black and white. It's on YouTube if you want to search that. But You Win Again. So that came 87. Again, I would have guessed You Win Again was more early to mid 90s for some reason. So really, if you look at that, their fallow period was kind of the early 80s by the look of it. And then I guess through the 90s, but by the time the 90s came, they'd kind of be having, I see those kind of resurgences of kind of nostalgia or whatever. And then that last one, or not the second to last one at least, 18, This Is Where I Came In. So that was said recorded in 2000, released in 2001 from the album This Is Where I Came In. And it also got Spicks and Specks. So Spicks and Specks maybe is the first song they ever did in 1966. And that song, This Is Where I Came In, that's probably one of my favorite Bee Gees songs because it has a different feeling to it. It kind of is more reminiscent of their 60s work. It doesn't lean so heavily on the dance pop aspect that they maybe were obviously big into in the 70s. So yeah, if I were to choose songs that I like, I much prefer things like Spicks and Specks and 1941 and Massachusetts and things like that. Not that I super love them, not that my favorite, band of that era or anything like that, but probably of all the songs I did, I think This Is Where I Came In was the song I liked the most. Maybe. Now, so what does it say? So like I said, this came in 2001. So I would assume the thing that I remember is that Maurice Gibb died very early in the year. It was like January. I remember I was at university because I was at summer school, and obviously January in New Zealand is summer school. So in New Zealand, I'm sure every country has this, but in New Zealand, if you want to speed up your degree at university, you can take extra papers during the summer. And I did that for 2 years, 2 summers. And it was either the summer of 2003 or 2004. Maybe 2003, but 2000, it was definitely 2002. Pretty sure it's 2003. January 2003 is when Maurice Gibb died. Maybe 04. Anyway, that's really here or there, but that's over 20 years ago, 22, 23 years ago, which seems crazy, but it just seems so recent. And he died in I think he was having a relatively routine procedure from memory. What's the point of even saying this? Because I'm just guessing and having half remembered memories. But I remember the family were talking about they were going to sue the doctor or the hospital where he died because he wasn't old, and it wasn't like I don't even think it was surgery. But don't quote me on that, obviously. Actually, I'll have a look on my phone. Why don't I do that? Because I don't usually do that nowadays. I used to always do that. But because I used to use my phone for filming and have something next to me that I could check while I was doing it. Maurice Gibb. Okay, 12th of January 2003. I was right. And he was, how old was he? 53. So, nowadays that really isn't old, is it? 50. I'm 45. Jesus, that was 8 years away from me. So, it just seemed, I don't know. It's age is weird. I don't even talk about that. How it changes as you get older, obviously. Okay, so he died suddenly from a cardiac arrest. Okay, so sorry, so it was surgery for a twisted intestine. Okay, well, twisted intestine actually is quite serious. So I was wrong. For some reason, I thought it was a colonoscopy or something like that, like a diagnostic thing. But okay, if you have a twisted intestine, that's a serious thing. I know. And he had a cardiac arrest afterwards. And obviously, after having surgery, you are in a quite delicate situation. That's why you've got to stay in hospital because they've got to monitor your vitals. And so private funeral was attended by 200, including Michael Jackson. Robin Gibb wrote to Mojo about Maurice's death in 2000. We were kids together and teenagers. We spent the whole of our lives with each other. because of our music. I can't accept that he's dead. I just imagine he's alive somewhere else. Barry and Robin ceased performing as a group for a time, I should assume, or for a time, but later decided to perform occasionally under the Bee Gees' banner until, okay, Robin died in 2012. I thought it was like 2019 or something. That's 20, oh, it's not 20, but it's what, 14 years ago. Kidney failure due to cholera. So 62 is young as well. So yeah, it's kind of, they talk about that often, that how being a famous musician really limits your life expectancy. That, obviously that the drugs and alcohol are a big part of that. And just the kind of, I guess, the lifestyle of travel and just sleep and all that, the lack of sleep or irregular sleeping patterns. And like I said, drugs and alcohol, obviously. Maybe something can be said for the habitual life. And when I mean habitual life, I mean as in when you work a job and, it's like kind of you have not a purpose, but you have a regimen that you stick to. And I don't know, maybe that has nothing to do with it, I don't know. But it's, a lot of musicians don't live to be very old, really, when you think about it. If you go through a big band, and there aren't many that haven't lost one or two members relatively young. So like the Beatles, obviously, okay, so murder and cancer. The Stones, well, Brian Jones died he drowned, didn't he? I think it was like alcohol or drug related. Charlie was old. Pink Floyd, Sid Barrett died relatively, I think he was in his 50s, maybe. Maybe he was just sick, he had just turned 60, but obviously he'd been unwell. Michael Jackson, the Bee Gees. Well, that's pretty obvious. I'm kind of stating the obvious here, as long as it's a earth-shattering revelation, but it is crazy when you kind of stop and think about it. It's almost like kind of like a Faustian bargain or something like that. Maybe that's going a bit far, but you know what I mean? Like you're kind of like, it's like a deal. You're saying, well, I get all this fame and this adulation and this life I can live, but often on the other side of that, you die young, sometimes really young. Anyway, that was a CD that I just literally picked out at random. And like I said, because I thought I hadn't spoken about it before, and I'm pretty sure I haven't spoken about it before. It's not something I listen to a whole bunch because I'm not really the biggest Bee Gees fan, but it's one of those ones that I consider the Bee Gees to be part of the 20th century musical canon, I guess if you want to call it that. It kind of, if you were listing off 100 acts that make up the width and breadth of the music produced and all the different genres and styles and what was popular and even what was not so popular, that they would certainly be within that group for the late 20th century. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching.